everyone, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been such a long time since I've been on camera, but that's because I've been traveling. So for this video, I wanted to do something kind of fun. I wanted to do a what I spent in a week in Europe. So if you don't know, one of the things I wanted to do during my sabbatical was take time to travel, and that's exactly what I did. I went to Europe for like 2 weeks, and I went to about 5 different cities in Europe. We went to Berlin, Cologne, Amsterdam, Lisbon, and Porto. This was an amazing trip. I've done quite a few of these what I spent in a week in New York City, but of course when you're traveling it's going to be a little bit higher, and hopefully you enjoyed this more spending vlog. So for day 1, we flew from New York City to Berlin. This was an 8-hour direct economy flight from JFK directly to Berlin airport. This was an open jaw flight, so the return would be from Lisbon to New York City. With Amex points, this flight came out to about $13.50. So once we arrived to Berlin, we were tempted to take an Uber because we were super tired from the flight. But before we came, we did a little bit of research that showed that Berlin had a really good transportation from the airport directly to the area we were living in. And it was so cheap. It was like only $4 for that direct subway ride. And this was just a general theme in Berlin, and this is why I think it's one of my favorite cities in Europe. It has amazing public transportation, from the underground trains to the above ground trains. It's walkable. It has really safe bike lanes. Like, Berlin really impressed me. After about a 30-minute train ride, we finally arrived at our hotel. We stayed at the Mandala Hotel in Potsdamer Platz, and this hotel room was huge. Outside of the regular hotel necessities, it had a mini kitchen, a living room, a terrace, and a separate sleeping area, and it was in the center of Berlin. In hindsight, this hotel room was probably a little bit bigger than what we should have gone for. Because our flight was a red-eye flight, we were super hungry when we arrived, so we decided to get breakfast. The meal that we got was an avocado toast and coffee. My portion came out to about $10, which compared to New York City is very affordable. So our main activity for our first day in Berlin was attending a 3-hour walking tour that we found on Airbnb. So every city I visit, I'm always go for a walking tour because it's such a good way to learn about the history of a city, and sometimes you can even meet some cool tourists that are also traveling. So this tour was really informative. I learned so much about World War II and the Cold War and the impact on those big events on Berlin. This was a tips-based tour, so you could kind of give him whatever you wanted, but he anchored us at $30, which is what we gave him because he did a great job on the tour. After the tour, we went to a restaurant that was close by, and I'm not going to expose this restaurant, but it did not have the best meal. It had actually one of the worst meals I've ever had in my life. The combination of ceviche and gravy was something I definitely never needed to try in my life. So after this dinner, I was really convinced that Berlin had horrible food. So I went to Instagram and I asked you guys to give me some Berlin suggestions, and I'm gonna say you guys really pulled through. So this cafe was delicious. I highly recommend if you're visiting Berlin to check this one out. One thing I'll say about Europe is that they have amazing fruits and vegetables. I don't know why they taste so much better than the fruits and vegetables in the US, but this salad was one of the best salads I've ever had in my entire life. One thing we noticed was that quite a few museums in Berlin were free, which is amazing. So after brunch, we decided to go to the Topography of Terror. This is the Nazi building that was untouched during World War II because the airline pilots used it as navigation, so right here. And this is pieces of the Berlin Wall right over here. This museum was the Third Reich's Gestapo headquarters, and it was truly terrifying learning about the Third Reich's rise to power. So after the museum, we decided to hop onto the subway. One really cool thing we noticed about the subway was that there was nowhere to check your tickets. Unlike a lot of the subway systems I've seen in New York, Paris, usually have something where you show your ticket or you present your ticket, but Berlin didn't have it. So you kind of walk directly onto the train and no one really watching to validate your ticket, which made us think that maybe there were a lot of people riding the train in Berlin for free. From the train, we arrived at our second activity for the day, which was a bike tour. Because Berlin is very spread out, the bike tour allowed us to see the east and the west side of Berlin. It was really cool to see the Soviet architecture in the east, and we also got to see the East Side Gallery, and we saw the iconic Kiss. And after the bike tour, we were really tired, so we wanted to get dinner. Again, this was walking distance, and it was a recommendation from you guys on Instagram. This was Wang Chang. It was so good. I love noodles and I love spicy foods, and these were spicy biang biang noodles covered in Szechuan pepper. If you're someone who really loves spicy food, I highly recommend this place. Afterwards, we went to an absinthe bar. So I think absinthe is legal in the US, so we had to try it out. Obviously, we couldn't handle it. We only had a small sip because it's 99% alcohol. This was our last day in Berlin. We decided to start the day with brunch, of course. This brunch was so good. It was even better than the last brunch spot. We got waffles and an egg dish, and let's talk about this presentation. It was literally a work of art. At this point, I take back any of the Berlin food slander I gave the first day because most of the restaurants we went to were like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 restaurants.
Wow, that was so good, guys. Literally the best breakfast so far.
After brunch, our main activity for this day was going to Sanssouci Palace in Potsdam. It was a quick metro ride away. Sanssouci Palace was Frederick the Great's summer home. Compared to palaces like Versailles, it was on the smaller end, but I actually liked how small it was because you could really see everything in the palace. We also spent some time enjoying the gardens. After Sanssouci, we went back to Berlin to grab dinner at this restaurant. So Berlin isn't the typical summer destination, but I think right now I would say it's my favorite city in Europe. I felt like this was the first city I came to in Europe that I was like, wow, I could actually live here and live a very enjoyable life here. It was very modern, amazing public transportation, very walkable. I also loved learning about the city's history, so I'm a huge fan of Berlin. I would highly recommend that you visit it. The next leg of our trip was actually going to Amsterdam. The train from Germany to Amsterdam was pretty affordable. What I will say is that the European train system is so much better than the one we have in the US. I feel like so many cities are accessible in Europe just through the train system. So you only have to take one flight to get to one European city, and you can basically access a lot of the major cities by train. The hotel we stayed at in Amsterdam was called the Pillows Hotel. This was actually my favorite hotel this entire vacation. It was on the smaller side, but it was beautiful. This used to be a former school that was turned into a hotel. One of the things I really loved was this huge window facing Oster Park. Because we had a pretty long train ride, we were pretty tired, so the only activity we had today was a canal tour. I highly recommend starting your trip to Amsterdam with a canal tour. Yes, it's touristy, but I felt like it was a great way to see a lot of the city at once. And this tour also came with food and drinks. For the next day, because we booked this hotel with an Amex credit card, we got a $100 credit to spend at the hotel. So this breakfast that we had this morning was totally free. Then we took the metro to our first activity for the day. Something to note if you visit Amsterdam is that it's a bike-friendly city. There are actually more bikes than people in this city. And this is only really nice if you have access to a bike, because you really can't use Uber in certain parts of Amsterdam because the streets are very narrow. Instead, your main transportation option is going to be the train or walking. And we got a 24-hour pass for the train. Hey everyone, so we are in Amsterdam. Today we spent time getting coffee. We missed our first tour, but it's okay. Now we're on our way to the Dutch Resistance Museum. Two words I never really associate with each other, but I'm excited to learn more about Dutch resistance. How about you, Andrew?
I mean, this museum was recommended to us by the staff at the hotel. They said it's been newly renovated and it's not that crowded. So I'm hoping we get to see a lot of history and learn about the past, so we're not doomed to repeat it.
What do you think about Amsterdam so far?
I am really enjoying Amsterdam. As long as you just take your perspective shift of like a slower way of living without the convenience of cars and a taxi a tap away, then it's much easier. But it can definitely be an adjustment if you're used to a car-dependent city where if you want to pay extra, you have the convenience of getting somewhere in your own personal vehicle. You're either biking or you're taking the train here. And taking cars actually very inconvenient with the traffic, so.
Yeah, so far I will say I think I like Berlin better than Amsterdam.
So our first activity was the Dutch Resistance Museum. Because of the name of the museum, we expected to see the Dutch resisting, the Germans in World War II, but there was almost no resistance happening. But I still highly recommend this museum. After the museum, we went on another free walking tour. As you guys know, like almost every city I went to a walking tour. This one was also really good. One fact that really surprised me about Amsterdam was that there are more foreigners in the city than people who are ethnically Dutch, which was kind of crazy to me. And we learned the coffee shops don't sell coffee here. So after our walking tour, we decided to get dinner in the hotel restaurant. This was a pricier dinner and the portions were very European sized. They were very small, but the food was so good. And with our $100 Amex credit, this brought the dinner to a more reasonable price. We started the next day with, of course, the free hotel breakfast. This free hotel breakfast felt like it was really worth it. Because we were so full from breakfast, we only needed to find one additional restaurant for the end of the day. And this is a really cool Amex perk. So if you travel a lot, I highly recommend that you get the Amex Platinum card. After breakfast, we decided to go to the Rijksmuseum. This museum, again, was very beautiful. Actually, it really reminded me of a Catholic church. We saw a lot of art from Rembrandt. This was definitely a more expensive excursion because we had a private tour guide and we were with a small tour group learning about a lot of the major pieces that Rembrandt painted, as well as like who Rembrandt was and the significance of the painting. So just added more context to the museum experience. Of course, if you want to just explore the museum by yourself, that's way more affordable. It's actually less than $30, but we were fine splurging for something that we wanted to do. Afterwards, we spent time just exploring Amsterdam and checking out a lot of the cute cafes. One interesting thing that we came across while we were exploring Amsterdam was this American food store. It's so funny because I feel like this is what Europeans think Americans eat, because everything was just candy, cereal, and junk food. Okay, so I have a controversial opinion about Amsterdam compared to Berlin. Berlin, I loved. I feel like it over exceeded my expectations. Whereas Amsterdam, I felt like under exceeded. Amsterdam just did not live up to my expectations, basically. Felt like it was kind of mid, as the Gen Z kids say. Like in certain areas of the city, like near the red light district, it was kind of dirty. It felt kind of like it was a European Vegas because there were a lot of bachelor parties there. So honestly, I probably wouldn't visit Amsterdam again after my experience. So for the final leg of our trip, we decided to go to Portugal. We had 2 cities planned in Portugal. Our flight from Amsterdam to Porto Airport was actually completely covered by points. The hotel we stayed at was the Maison Albar Hotel in the center of Porto. This hotel was so beautiful. I really liked this hotel a lot. It had vintage vibes. It was so beautiful and spacious. The ceilings were like so high. So our first day in Porto, we didn't do too much. We just had dinner and we just relaxed that entire day. But the second day we got the free breakfast, and I think this hotel had the best free breakfast out of the other 2 free breakfast hotels. We booked this through Amex again, and this breakfast was amazing. It was a huge spread. After eating this meal, we didn't even need to eat lunch or dinner because it was so much food. Our main activity for the second day was doing a Douro Valley tour.
Hey everyone, what's up? We are in the Douro Valley in Portugal. This is our day 2 in Portugal. We arrived yesterday, and today we're on a vineyard doing this really cool Airbnb tour where we visit 2 different vineyards, and then we also do like a river cruise on the Douro Valley. So if you don't know, Portugal is known for port wine. In the Douro Valley, right now we're in a vineyard that has different types of wine. We've been drinking mostly green wine, so Vino Verde, and also rosé. So it's been really cute. We've also been getting really good olive oil and plums because they also grow olives on this vineyard. And it's so cute. There's like a little dog sleeping over here. The guard dog is sleeping, and yeah, we're having a great time.
This tour was amazing. We found it on Airbnb, and it was a half a day long tour where we took an hour ride with our tour guide and a small tour group to the Douro Valley. We visited a few different vineyards. We got to meet the owners of the vineyard and try the wine, cheese, and bread, which was really nice. And then after our first vineyard, the next thing we did was that we went to a small cafe right near the Douro River where we had a lunch with our group, and we got to try a Portuguese meal. Then we actually rode on the Douro River Valley, which was really nice. This was a bit touristy because it was just a bunch of people who were on vacation smushed together on these boats, but the Douro River was so beautiful. And then after that, we ended at the last vineyard, which was really beautiful, and our tour guide was really nice. We got to try really good port wine, and our tour guide actually sang to us. That was a really nice time in Porto. After a few days in Porto, we decided to go to Lisbon. It was really unfortunate because the trains had been very reliable our entire time in Europe, except the train from Porto to Lisbon. There was a strike happening, and we didn't know until we actually got there. And unfortunately, we never got our tickets refunded, so we had to just last minute get a bus ride to Lisbon. It wasn't that bad. It was like a 3 to 4 hour bus ride. In Lisbon, we stayed in an Airbnb. After staying in a few nice hotels, this Airbnb, I don't know, just wasn't really it, but it was centrally located. In Lisbon, we did a wide range of activities. We started, of course, with a walking tour. This walking tour blew my mind, though. I think this was the best walking tour of all the walking tours in Europe because I felt like the guide really did a good job diving into the history of Portugal. One crazy fact that I learned from this walking tour was that Portugal was one of the first European countries to land in Africa, and Portuguese were the ones who invented the transatlantic slave trade. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and there's also a Lagos Portugal. So I was always confused, like, why do these two different locations have the same exact name, right? And it's because Lagos was a huge center of the transatlantic slave trade. So that was a crazy fact I did not expect to learn in my time in Portugal. We also spent a lot of time visiting really nice restaurants in Portugal, and our transportation was very small because we walked around the entire time we were in Portugal. So let's do the math. I'm gonna put the number here because I haven't done the math yet. This is the total for 10 days in Europe. Of course, as you can see, it's way higher than what I expected, but it's still in the budget that we set. There were ways we definitely could have made this trip a lot cheaper. One way we did try to make it cheaper was through using credit card points. We used a lot of points on the flights we took on this trip. Another way we could have made this trip a little bit cheaper is by staying in one location. As you can see, transportation is a huge part of our budget because we were jumping around different cities. If we'd stayed in the same place, it would have been a lot cheaper. But we had a great trip and it was a great way to celebrate getting married. And I hope this gave you a little bit of understanding about what a more luxury vacation would cost if you were to travel to Europe.